Hello, and welcome to the SaWGuy podcast.
Like scary movies. What's your favorite scary movie?
Here's Johnny.
We'll tear your soul apart.
The boogeyman is real, and you found him.
Game over, man. Game over.
What do you want?
I want to hear you scream. From the front time, bitch!
Welcome to the SaWGuy podcast. As always, I'm the SaWGuy, bringing you episode number 7. Lucky number 7. And I figured, okay, since we got to do 7, take those odds to the casino, right? Probably not, but I am going to take you to Nevada, as in Perfection, Nevada. So if you guys know and saw the hints that I was dropping, we're doing this episode today on fucking Tremors. And I have to do it on the whole series of Tremors because it's one of those things where Tremors was one of those underground hits that it sucked in theaters, but because of VHS being so big and what it was, it blew up. And then you have all these other sequels, and you have a new one coming out, right? So, but anyways, without further ado, let's get started. So, since we're talking about Tremors, what does a lot of people remember about it? What do I remember about it? I can tell you right now. The first thing I remember with Tremors, that was the first that was the first action horror film that I've ever seen. / sci-fi, because there've been so many genres, you know. But basically the whole story of Tremors, what it was about, was basically these people living out in the middle of nowhere in the Nevada desert, and these underground monsters are taking out their cattle one by one, and they're killing people one by one. And later on in the story, you figure out, like, what the hell is it? You know, that ends up being a fucking underground worm, basically, you know? But what made it so good is that, like, you know, it sucked so bad in theaters that when it came out in VHS times, around, I want to say, because the movie was big in 89, it didn't really big, well, shit, what was it? 89 to 91, around that time frame, okay? At least I can, from what I remember. But when it came out on VHS, every fucking buddy had that. Because it was a type of movie that you could play at a party. You could play when you want to do a movie night. You want a little bit of action. You want to have a little bit of humor into it, dark humor. But it had it all, you know? And the whole story with Tremors is just, it's so ridiculous now that we go back and watch it. But to me, Tremors was one of those last of the great creature films that used, you know, practical effects. They used, like, for the worm coming out of the ground and everything, the snakes, they used puppets. I mean, they used everything. Miniatures. I didn't know until I started, you know, doing research for this episode, and I was like, what the hell? How they did all that scenes, you know? Look it up, and it's all miniatures. Go figure, right? You know? But anyways, the whole story of Tremors follows two guys. Kevin Bacon's character and Fred Ward's character. They're Earl and Val. So basically, the story shows that they're two handymen, you know, they're basically making a living, just doing all the little tidbits and, you know, random work, you know, putting up barbed wire fences and shit like that. So they kind of bicker back and forth, you know, and during the beginning, after they were done or whatever, they were making their plans like, oh, okay, you know, we'll do this, we'll do that, you know. On the way, I guess they had they really didn't explain it too much in the first one, but I guess they had, like, college students go out there to study the geology of things. You know, geology is the study of Earth and stuff, you know. So he goes in, and you see one of the female characters for the first time because Kevin Bacon's character, you know, he's he's one of those lady killers, right? So he goes over there and he tries to see her. Doesn't follow his list, so he's like, all right, whatever. And then basically the whole story goes is how you see little bits of the worm in action, you know, where the worm comes out, does this, and then basically, you know, Earl and Val, they get tired of doing their work, so they said, okay, fuck it, let's do something, get paid a little bit better. And eventually they just get tired of this shit because they go into a septic tank cleaning thing, you know. Well, they rent a septic tank cleaner to clean out somebody's septic tank. And basically it busts and they got shit all over on them. And then that was just their point of no return. So they said, okay, fuck it, we're going to leave. They tried to leave, and then that's when everything goes haywire, you know? And it was actually, it's an interesting story. It's very simple, very basic. But for the first one, I mean, that movie, it's underrated a lot. Because you have a lot of good actors. You had Kevin Bacon, you know, everybody knows fucking Kevin Bacon. Fred Ward, he was pretty good. he looks like an older version of the actor who played Shane off Walking Dead. You know, if you really look at it, you got that guy. Michael Gross, who basically he followed the whole Tremors series all the way through, and he was the dad off Family Ties. Reba McEntire, friggin' Reba McEntire, she was in the movie, and she was all about, you know, big on guns and stuff like that. Now you see her in KFC commercials talking about Smoky Mountain Barbecue and shit like that. But that was basically your main top actors, your top billed actors that were in the movie. And so the whole story goes is that they try to leave. Something happens. They see an old man. He died of thirst, you know, up on top of a power pole. And basically, after that, you know, they just started worrying a little bit of things here and there. And then they were telling the people working on the road, like, hey, be careful, there's a killer out there, because they didn't know what the fuck it was. And then the worm comes after them, and then all this other shit starts happening. The story all unfolds, and they figured out, okay, well, you know, it's a big ass worm. He was chasing after them. Then they figured out, okay, it can't smell them, it can't see them. They know it's a big ass worm. They barely found out that there was tentacles that came out, you know, the little snake monsters or whatever. And they would hook them and pull them in the ground. But what was cool about that is just, you know, they actually showed, okay, hey, we're not stupid. We could pick up one or two things. It's kind of cheesy now if you look at it, but back in the 90s, it that was good for what it was, you know, because for me, I think of like the creature films like from the 60s, you know, Attack of the Giant Spiders and shit, or Martian movies. You know, I think this was the last film that really like put it on the map. After that, it all went CGI. But anyways, I'll get to that in a minute. So the whole story goes is that basically they figure out what the worm is, how it works, and things like that. Then it follows them back from the middle of nowhere to their hometown or their home village. You know, it's a population of like maybe 10, 15 people in Perfection, Nevada, you know. So basically it eats off another few more people. They figured out, okay, we can hide from it if we go on top. They go on top. And then my favorite fucking scene was Michael Gross's character, Burt Gummer, and his wife, Reba McEntire's character. They basically were coming back from shooting. Or they weren't shooting, but they were like looking around and seeing if they can help anybody else. But anyways, there was a scene where they were getting home and they put bullets in that little bucket thing. That's basically to clean the brass for bullets, if y'all don't know. But anyways, it makes a loud noise, and Kevin Bacon's telling him on the walkie, get up on your fucking roof, get up on your roof. Then the whole worm comes out. They start just going ape shit and start shooting it, you know. That was one of my favorite scenes. That was actually, you know, one of my favorite scenes that got me got me curious about guns and got me started into it, you know, when I was young. And for that scene, for the way that they did it, if you look behind the scenes on YouTube, even on the Tremors DVD that they have, like the 4-pack or 5-pack or whatever that's out, they'll show you how they did it. Basically, they did a green room, and they made it seem like they were shooting, and then they just tied in the miniature with it, which was really freaking smart and for what they did for it, you know. But it was actually pretty interesting how they did that scene. They just fired whatever freaking calipers, and then finally an 8-gauge shotgun took it out. Then the whole story goes is that, you know, they figured out there's still 2 worms left. They were going to go to the mountains and hide. And then basically they figured out, okay, let's do fishing with dynamite. You know, homemade dynamite. The ones that Bert was doing, right? So they make it. One of them blows up. The second one ends up being smarter. Then when it fucking spits out the dynamite right back onto the rock, they figured out, you know, oh shit, it's going to blow up. They all run out. The worm basically kind of lures them out. You know, for the whole movie, for what it was, and then especially at the ending with the twist, he throws a bomb behind him, scares him, flies off the cliff. It was really pretty good for a one and done. It really was. They didn't really need sequels, but back in 1990, 91, there was a lot of like fans that really enjoyed it. I was one of them, you know. But anyways, so you flash forward into 1996. This is, you know, about 5 years after the first one. They finally made a sequel to it, and the sequel to it wasn't that bad either. Because they got the original writers, they got the original director, I believe, and then they also got the original guy who did the music score. And music score to me is everything in a horror movie, or in a movie like that, you know. But anyways, what they did in the second one is that they figured out, oh, there's more graboids, we just never seen them, and they're in Mexico, right? So, story takes place, you know, 5 years later. they basically made all their money and everything. Everybody all went their own way. There was only two characters that returned from the first one. So you had Earl's character, Fred Ward, and you had Michael Gross, who came back as Burt, you know, the gun wielding guy, the Doomsday Prepper, you know. So the story goes, Earl Bassett's on his last leg. You know, he invested all of his money poorly or whatever, and then comes to find out, what's his name? Christopher Garton? I forgot his character. Grady? Brady or Grady? Grady. It was Grady, okay. Can you tell I haven't watched much of the other sequels? But anyways, he goes in there and tells them, hey, the Mexican army wants to hire you. They'll pay you whatever money. They'll pay you $50,000 each worm that you kill, right? So it comes to find out, he said, fuck it, whatever. He goes into Mexico with them. And, you know, when he's down in Mexico, there's a small crew out there. And they basically said, okay, well, if you can capture one alive, great. If not, you know, just kill him. We'll pay you the 50 grand each. So it goes into the whole story that they're in Mexico. Earl uses all of his tricks, you know, putting the dynamite on a moving car. They bite it, blow up, do whatever, right? Comes to find out they get stuck. Comes to find out that there was like 30 or 40 more graboids chasing after them. And they said, oh, you know, who's crazy enough to help us? In comes Burt Gummer, you know, the Doomsday Prepper. And what I loved about part 2 scene is that when the graboid broke through his wall, he's actually sitting in his basement watching movies about World War II documentaries as the graboid's behind him like this fucking big. You know, I mean, classic, right? It was cool. They kept a lot of the continuity in. But anyways, they tell him that Earl calls him and tells him, hey, we got a graboid problem. He goes over there to goes and help him. And basically, you find out what happens with Reba McEntire's character. I don't know the reason why she didn't come back. They never really said. I know Kevin Bacon was supposed to come back for the second one, but they went from like a $17 million budget to a $4 million budget, so they had to do something. They had to cut somewhere, you know? But anyways, the whole story goes, Burt comes in, he's all prepared. They're both killing off worms left and right. Well, anyways, Earl and Grady, they end up finding another worm, but it's sick. It's hyperventilating, it's weird or whatever. So they figured, okay, we captured a live one. Later on in the night, it starts screeching. And then you have the worms that evolved into shriekers. Now, this is kind of different how they did it with the story. So, basically, the graboid, it's like the first level entry of its evolution. Part 2 showed you that they turn into shriekers, and instead of hearing by sound, they see by heat. Which, okay, I could see the potential in that. Then they show that they killed one. Then Burt was attacked by a bunch of them. He ran them all down. He saved one live one. They were checking it out. And they discovered that they don't multiply. Well, they don't multiply as much as the graboids, but they multiply even faster by eating whatever food. And they eat so much, and then they just pop out another one. So shriekers, they can go from like 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6, you know, that kind of shit. But anyways, by the time they figure that out, they're all over inside their warehouse. They close up the warehouse and they go, fuck, we're fucked. Okay, you know. Then they use one of the bombs to blow off Bert's truck, which have all the bombs in there, and it ends up being a big boom. End of part 2. And part 1 and 2, together side by side, they were both good films. I get it. And then part 2 still had a lot of practical effects. They used a lot of puppets. I mean, for what it was, because that one went straight to DVD, well, straight to VHS at the time. And it was really good quality, you know? I mean, they hadn't lost their touch. I mean, yeah, you could tell they were on a budget, but it was still enjoyable, you know? Part 3, on the other hand, is where it kind of just like, you know, from my opinion. Part 3, I believe they did it straight to Sci-Fi Channel and straight to DVD. Part 3 was basically, you know, the only returning actor was Burt, you know, from Michael Gross. Burt Gummer, he came back. And basically the whole story was they're back in Perfection Valley, and then the worms come back again. And they're prepared, though. I mean, they have cement around their homes and shit like that. And I don't know. It was just a unique storyline. And then you had one of the actors from the first one, McGill. He returned back for part 3. But we all know in horror movies, if you return, you're returned to die, you know. And that's basically what happened later on in the story. But the story goes is that some guy, he comes back. Well, he goes to Perfection. He makes like this fake Tremors ride, is what they call it, or graboid hunting or whatever. And so they figure out that, you know, that it's graboid hunting. Well, not graboid hunting, but it's like a graboid sanctuary, kind of. So they can't kill graboids or whatever. Eminent domain and all that happens. And they ended up calling the government. The government gets involved. And, you know, they basically go back and forth. And finally, the government says, okay, just try to take them out, but save one. So the whole story changes. Then you find out that the worms, they finally evolved into shriekers, and then they changed from shriekers into flying versions, which, I thought it was kind of funny. I thought it was a joke that they called them ass blasters. Because they basically have, fire that blows out of their ass and they fly or whatever, then they drop an egg. Then you have a graboid, right? But anyways, the story was interesting, but the way that it was executed, I mean, they did it even on a tighter budget. Because everything was all CGI, and they used a lot of restock footage from the first one. And I enjoyed it. I mean, not everyone else enjoyed it because, it was so over the top with the CGI. But I thought it was pretty cool because they introduced a albino graboid that just kept following Bert because he had some kind of sonic shit on his watch or whatever. But it was pretty cool. And then later on, you figure out that Melvin comes back, and he's trying to make a deal with Bert about trying to take over all the land and all that stuff, and say, hey, give you a piece of the pie, I'm going to build all real estate. He leaves him there on a rock and takes off. And that was the last that you hear of Melvin. Melvin was the kid in the first one who ended up being, he was one of the stupid typical 90s young kid in that one. And then flash forward, I think it was 2 or 3 years later, they did part 4. Now, part 4 had potential, but that just, I don't know. To me, it's not a cash grab. It's just they tried to do something with the story, and it was basically a story of Burt Gummer's relative. He comes back. Well, he immigrates from somewhere, and he immigrates to Perfection Valley. That's where they find out about the graboids, and this is the old 1800s Western times, how they kill the graboids and stuff like that. And, you figure it out. And I thought, okay, it's pretty cool. Cover wagon times, Westerns, 6-shooters. All right, I could roll with that. But just some of the things is just like, I can't buy into it. I really can't. And at the same time as they did part 4, they did a TV series. And Sci-Fi Channel did the TV series too. What sucks, they only did 13 episodes. And they did 1 season. And the only thing that sucked about it is that the TV show was actually really good. It was basically kind of like a continuation of part 3, but it was just like their normal everyday to life thing. If something was off, Bert would go and take care of it or whatever. And it was a good TV show. It had a lot of potential. They just never gave it a chance. They gave it 1 season and then cut it. But so you have part 4 that came out the same time as the TV show. And this was, mid-2000s already at that time. And then it just kind of flatlined for a long time. Like, everyone kind of forgot about Tremors. But then, about 4 years ago, 4 years ago, they started doing the script for part 5, which was actually pretty cool. And then they released 5, about 2 years ago. 3 years ago. 2015 is when they released it. And what was pretty cool about it is that they brought back Bert, and they basically still kept the same continuity with it. Only this time, Jamie Kennedy was an added character, and you find out later on, spoiler alert, Jamie Kennedy ended up being his long-lost son, and he was going after him, just to meet him, see who he was. And at the same time, it was basically set up like a similar plot like part 2, like, oh yeah, we have graboids in this area, we need you to come take care of it. But there was a twist with this one. This one was actually interesting because they said, okay, now graboids have been around for a long time, but now I need you to help us fight ones in Africa. Like, what the fuck? Africa? What? But it makes sense, because out there in the wild in Africa where there's no life or whatever other than just animal life or whatever, it makes sense, which is actually pretty cool. So there was a lot of potential in that one. But anyways, they go to Africa. They see the different variations of it. I don't think they showed the shriekers. I really don't know. I know they showed the graboid, and then the graboid's tentacles detached from their mouth, and they kind of swarmed around like a snake. And then they had the ass blasters. But basically, they got set up to go over there to basically kidnap some eggs and try to help the guy sell it for a black market. They didn't know, and by the time they found out, they were double-crossed. Then the whole story goes is that now they're trying to go like full-on kill all the graboid mode, And so that's basically what they did. They go into the graboid's nest, they killed it all, They killed them all except one and one egg, and then they had this big drop-off where they were in, I don't know the name of the town in Africa they were in, but it's called the Cradle of Life, if you translate it, So they're there, they place the egg on the rock, up on top, they put all these metal posts and pillars around, and the trick was to get the worm in the middle, and then the lightning would hit the metal poles, shock it, and then they just shoot the shit out of it. So basically, that's how the whole part 5 went down, and then at the end of it, Jamie Kennedy and Michael Gross's character, Burt Gummer, they were going to go their separate ways. Then finally, he was just like, you know what, fuck it, let's go hunt monsters. And I thought it was pretty interesting, because they showed that now that they can't hunt graboids, they're hunting monsters like the Chupacabra and the Jersey Devil and all that shit. Then they left it open, which was pretty cool. Until now, in 2018, they just announced that they're doing a part 6, right? Part 6 seems promising because it's the same African style version of the graboid. So it's the one that jumps up and twists, goes in the ground, has the tentacles that come out. And the only difference is they're bigger, and it's in the Arctic in Canada, like more of the North Pole. They haven't said so much of the story, other than just the fact, oh, it takes place in the Arctic, which is a little different, but I'll roll with it. I mean, you know, they did it in Africa, they did it in Mexico, they did it twice in Nevada. You know, I want to see how they're going to take this story and see what they're going to do with it. Not to mention, I know Michael Gross, he's getting up there in age, and I know he can't be hunting graboids forever, you know. So I don't know if they're going to pass the torch. I don't know if a returning character is coming back or not. They just released a trailer, so if you see it on YouTube, type in Tremors 6, it will pop up. Like, it blew me away, because they did a little bit of CGI, but they did practical effects, so it kind of reminds me of a little bit of part 2, part 5-ish, you know. But overall with the series, man, you got 5 movies as of right now, soon to be 6. You have the TV show with just Michael Gross, and then now there's talk that Kevin Bacon's coming back, but he's doing a TV show based on right after the first one. So how they are going to do that, I don't know. They haven't released any details on it. They basically said right after the first one, Kevin Bacon and, you know, the chick Rhonda, the character that he fell in love with, they get married. Supposedly there's something that they have a divorce or whatever. This is all rumored, you know. And he goes back to perfection, and the graboids are still around. There's different variations of them. So they might tie in the Shriekers, they might tie in the Ass Blasters, but then it like throws off the continuity of like 2, 3, 4. So who knows? Who knows? But overall, the whole series was actually really good for what it was. I wouldn't call it more sci-fi. I would call it more like original creature horror. That's where I would tie it into. And it's still a horror film, because if you see part 1 and 2, they had a lot of horror elements. Part 3, they changed it up to be a little bit more comedic. Part 4 was just kind of a wash. I mean, they kind of did it comedic. They did it to fill the story. Part 5, they brought back to a little bit of the action horror roots from the first one. Part 6, I don't know how they're going to do part 6, but from what it looks like, there's going to be a lot of action horror to it, you know? So we'll see. I'm kind of interested on that one. And, you know, basically, the first one always holds my heart just because I've seen that movie so many times as a kid. There was a time I was watching that shit like 3 times a day, because that was the only movie we had in VHS, you know? But when you've seen that movie, and I ask people about, like, hey, have you seen Tremors? Everybody forgets about it, but then when you tell them, oh, it's underground monsters and everything. Oh, yeah, okay, I seen it. Yeah, I got you. You know, it's one of those classic ones that people forget because it's underrated. It was a popular film. It just kind of got swept under the rug a little bit. You know what I'm saying? But part 1 was always good. Part 2 was up there, but it's one of those movies that's genre bending in a way, which I like those as long as they do it right, you know. And back to what I was saying about how they had a little bit of dark humor with it. You know, they had some stupid stuff, like there was a scene in the first one where they're trying to throw a bomb and then run to the rock where they were stuck at, and basically Melvin's like, there's no way we're gonna make it over there, man. Bert gives him a freaking .357 revolver, said, hey, this will make them think twice. They're running, he's trying to shoot and it's empty, and then he goes, oh, there's no bullets in here, Bert, you asshole. Got you moving, didn't it? You know, I mean, there's a lot of little winks to it. Not so much comedic, but I mean, it was done in right taste, you know? It was done in the right proportion. But also, too, if you think about it, it never got quite popular, but there always was like a cult-like following towards it. And I don't know how to explain it, you know? I mean, you either know it or you don't. Basically, you know, as a normal horror fan like us, like me, I know that shit because that was one of the biggest things in the late '80s, early '90s, because it was the last creature film that was done right. If you see all these other new creature films, they're so-so, but they're more or less dedicated to Redbox. They're more or less dedicated straight to Netflix, straight to Sci-Fi Channel, and they're obviously done on a budget, so they do everything all CGI. And CGI is okay if done right, but they did too much of it, and it muddies it down. You know, it really does. But honestly, I'm anxious to see how they do the next one on part 6. I really am. I know also too the soundtrack, it kind of fell off a little bit after the first two, when part 3, 4 was 3 and 4 were just a wash soundtrack wise. Part 5, I think they brought back the original guy from the first one, so it was okay. Part 6, I haven't heard anything on the track listing. IMDb only gives you so much. It gives you a little bit until the movie's released, you know? But honestly, like, it's you used to see that movie so many freaking times. It was either on VHS or you would see that shit all the time on the normal channels, like on Saturday and Sunday when they had nothing to play. They would play Tremors, or they would do a Tremors marathon. They would play the first one, then the second one, play another movie, then they go back and play the first one and the second one. And that's how a lot of people actually saw it, because there wasn't shit on TV. You know? And then back to the practical effects, what I was talking about on those two. You know, a lot of people, they don't give it credit for the effects that they did, especially the first two, because if you look at the documentary, or if you look up behind the scenes and stuff on YouTube or whatever, it was actually interesting. They basically, the original idea was that they were going to build a worm, and then it had like an outer shell, and then it would slide out. But a lot of people joked about it and said, okay, that looks like foreskin on a penis, you know? So that's why they went and they changed it, so that way it's just a long-ass odd worm with spikes sticking out to move faster, and it had tentacles coming out of its mouth. Otherwise, if you got the one that sheds out of its skin, it kind of does look like a dick, you know what I'm saying? But I'm glad that they went with that idea with the tentacles coming out of the mouth. And then the way that they did the shriekers, I mean, all the effects were just practical, were just badass. They did it really good. Especially, they were very authentic on the gun scenes that they used. Every gun that they used. The only one I have an objection to, I mean, I'm a gun nut myself, was the fact that they were kept calling the 8-gauge shotgun an elephant gun. Granted, yeah, you use it for hunting big game animal, but they kept calling it, you know, elephant gun. That's the only thing I was just like, okay, they need to fix this shit. But who knows? I know, but all the other guns, you know, the 30-30 they got right, the lever action Winchester rifle. And Winchester was a big company in it. I mean, a lot of the guns in there were all Winchesters. I noticed a lot of the rifles, shotguns, things like that. But they were very detailed on it. They were very. It wasn't like they had a shotgun that had unlimited ammo and they just, like, you know, kept shooting. It was just, you know, it was legit. You know, the shotguns they were shooting had 5 shots. They chucked it, got another gun, swapped the magazine, were just spraying. But they also did a lot of good detail work on it. And then not only that, you know, if you look at the location where they did it, I know they shot it somewhere in the deserts of California, but I mean, it could pass for Nevada. I don't exactly know the area, but I know, what was it? It's a small, really small town. But they got the detail on that really good, especially when they carried it over to part 2. Because in part 2, when Val ran off and married the chick from the first one, Rhonda, he basically took over the truck, and it was just right down to the detail, you know. I don't know if it was a separate truck or the same truck. I mean, there was a 5-year gap into it, you know. So they did really good on the continuity for the first 2. Then when you talk about part 3 and 4, you know, the effects just kind of just... I mean, if I had to make a top list, I mean, obviously 1, 2 would be my, you know, top 2. And my third one right now would be probably part 5, but it depends on what part 6 does. You know, I haven't seen part 6. Coming out May 1st, don't forget that. I'll be the first guy to probably go and check it out, you know. But anyways, they did really good on all that, except, you know, when part 3 and part 4 come out, that CGI was just killer. And you'll know what I'm talking about, because after you see it and then you start seeing that it's just, some of it is the same footage from the first film, because you could tell the difference in the grain. I don't know if you guys are OCD like that. I'm OCD, and I'm like, really? You know? But they did it good. Story-wise, they did it good. And, you know, my hat's off to Michael Gross, you know, for staying as long as he did for all the Tremors series. Because without him, there wouldn't be a Tremors series, you know? There really wouldn't. I was fortunate enough to actually meet him at a con one time. And, you know, he was really cool. And real quick before I head on out, I know I'm hitting at that 30-minute mark. There's a lot of little tidbits that they did. And I don't know if you've ever seen it, but Burt has always worn an Atlanta Hawks hat. And that's in every one of the Tremors movies. So the first thing I said when I met him was, hey, how come you have an Atlanta Hawks, you know, hat? Was that like your favorite team or whatever? And he basically said, no, that's just trying to tie into Bert's character, try to keep continuity. Which I thought was pretty cool, you know? And he knows that us as horror fans, we pay attention to that shit, you know? And I thought it was really interesting that he did that. It was. I was like, oh, shit, okay. He knows what's going on. You know, he hasn't just done Tremors and that was it. I mean, he was on Family Ties, done a bunch of other stuff too, but it's pretty cool that he's still carrying that same character and still bringing that same passion. Keeps entertaining us, you know? But anyways, I know I rambled on and on about Tremors. But if you've never seen it, take a look at it, check it out. I can tell you right now, you could probably find the 4-pack, maybe the 5-pack movie set at, I know I've seen it at Walmart, I've seen them at Target. They go for like $5-10, you know? If you've never seen it, pick that up, check it out, and tell me all what you guys think. Because personally, Tremors is one of those 90s sci-fi / horror, I was going to say horse shit, horror genre bending movies. That's really good, you know? And I like to be interested to hear what you guys think about it. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I still watch to this day, and I've been watching it since I was a kid. So, but anyways, I'm the SaWGuy. Thank you all for enjoying episode number 7. Catch y'all next time, all right?
Bow down to the king.